Emmett Till and the founder of Mamie Till Mobley's Foundation. She was here the last time this bill was before this body. She's dead now. And I know she's looking down and hoping that we don't disappoint her. Mr. President, in February of 2019, this body did something historic. And I don't mean to be emotional, I'm raw this week. But I stood here with Kamala and we wept. And we talked about the hundreds of years, over a century, of effort to pass legislation, brought up and defeated time and time again in this body by avowed segregationists, and how proud I was that at a time when the partisanship is high in this country, we gathered together in one voice, 100 senators, to pass this exact same bill. Because there are good people in this body on both sides. And we were correcting a wrong of history. And nobody in this body needs a lecture on lynching and how horrible it is. Everybody in this body abhors racism and believes that this violence is unjust. There are friends of mine here. Unanimously, we passed that legislation. We made history on this floor. And this is why I'm confused, because this bill has been passed unanimously. And here we're on a day of a memorial service for another person whose murder was condemned by people on both sides of the aisle. I've sat where you sat, Mr. President, and watched the differences between the Republican leader and the Democratic leader. I don't go back that long in this body, but I've watched Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer disagree so deeply time and time again. But God, we came together and passed the bill unanimously. Mitch McConnell let that bill come to this floor, didn't try to block it. And my colleague over there, Rand Paul, was one of the first hands I shook on this Senate floor. He is my friend. And everything he said about his commitment to criminal justice reform, it is right. One of the first bills I wrote here, I wrote with Rand Paul. And then he went further. At another time like this, when America was raw, when another black man was unarmed was shot, he went as far in Time magazine to stand up and talk openly about the ProPublica data about a black man in America being about 100 times, if not more, likely to be shot by the police and someone white. And he said, he's shaking his head if I may recognize, he said that there must be something more going on here if it's that much. So I do not question the sincerity of his convictions. I've had too many conversations with him to question his heart. But I am so raw today, of all days that we're doing this. Of all days that we're doing this right now, having this discussion, when, God, if this bill passed today, what that would mean for America, that this body and that body have now finally agreed. Because I know when Congressman White, the last black person to serve in Congress before the fall, the god-awful fall of the backlash after Reconstruction fell, he gave this famous speech where he talked about the phoenix will rise, that one day black people will serve in this body. And here we are in the Senate making history, the first time 3 African Americans have even served together, Republican and Democrat, and we all came together leading on Kamala's bill. And there's something about us that we knew, that it was something more than the legalistic issues that my colleague now wants to bring up. That we were a nation that needed this historic healing. And that if we passed this, it would not only do something substantive to make a difference on the books of the American federal system, but God, it would speak volumes to the racial pain and the hurt of generations. I do not need my colleague, the senator from Kentucky, to tell me about one lynching in this country. I've stood in the museum in Montgomery, Alabama, and watched African-American families weeping at the stories of pregnant women lynched in this country and their babies ripped out of them, while this body did nothing. I can hear the screams, as this body and membership can, of the unanswered cries for justice of our ancestors. Every one of us is sensitive to that anguish. Every one of us is sensitive to that pain, as is the senator from Kentucky. And this week, Senator from Kentucky mentioned a colleague, Justin Amash. I want to tell my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, he was one of only 4 congressmen of a 435 body to vote against the anti-lynching bill. That means that this bill was supported by the leader of the Democrats, the Speaker of the House. It was supported by the leader of the Republicans, the whip of the Republicans, the whip of the Democrats. 400 plus votes supported this. Yet my colleague thinks that this bill is wrong. If this bill is wrong, then the Republican leadership of the House is wrong. If this bill is wrong, then the Democratic leadership of the House is wrong. If this bill is wrong, 99 senators are wrong. If this bill is wrong, then the NAACP is wrong. If this bill is wrong, then the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights is wrong. If this bill is wrong, then the Urban League of America is wrong. Legal organizations, civil rights organizations, Democrats and Republicans. Tell me another time when 500 plus congresspeople, Democrats, Republicans, House members, and senators come together in a chorus of conviction and say, now is the time in America that we condemn the dark history of our past and actually pass anti-lynching legislation. And now one man, and I do not question his motives because I know his heart, one man is standing in the way of the law of the land changing because of a difference of interpretation. This doesn't talk about bruising someone. It's a difference of interpretation. Does America need a win today on racial justice? Does the anguished cries of people in the streets? I've had children break down with me this week, wondering if this would be a country that values their lives as much as white people's lives. I've had to explain to grown men this week that there's still hope in America, that we can make change in America, that we can grow and heal in America, that we can make this a more perfect union. Well, today is a day we can do it. One thing, one member, to yield for once, like he did in February of 2019, yield for one day and give America this win. Let us pass this piece of legislation today of all days. Let's give a headline tomorrow of something that will give hope to this country, that we can get it right. It may not cure the ills that so many are protesting about, but God, it could be a sign of hope. So, Mr. President, I object to this amendment. I object on substance. I object on the law. And from my heart and spirit and every fiber of my being, I object for my ancestors.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
The senator for Kentucky.
I think it's important to know and to let the record show that I've been working with Senator Booker's office for 3 months on the amendment to this bill, that I'm willing